Your name's not down, you're not coming in.
Hey there, just a quick message ahead of this episode to say we hope you like the rebrand, which includes a new website, rawuk.com, that's the URL. On there you can listen to and watch all our previous content. You can get extra content. You can also buy our first ever Raw merchandise and even sign up to become a Raw member, which will keep us going and keep you at the heart of this exciting journey, earning perks in return. We need your support, so please do check us out at rawuk.com and remember to like, comment and subscribe to everything we do on all our channels. And of course, make sure you tell all your pals. But most of all, enjoy this latest episode. Cheers. So, Ian, in 1993, when Slipmatt started creating the SMDs, and we've talked earlier about why that you were drawn to that happier sound and why you didn't necessarily go down the darker route. Do you think that split in the scene was impossible to make sure that the rave scene could evolve? Was there any way that it didn't need to split?
No, I don't think. I think the split took a long time. You know, I think it definitely worked side by side for a long time. The only time, when it became a bit more, I'd say, into the happy hardcore thing, and it sometimes as a DJ, you had to sort of almost get used to the fact that, say, I followed Groove Rider at the Sanctuary. When I went on, you would see people disappear out that back door because they were then going over to Rollers. But you had to get your head together because then if you look to the entrance of the Sanctuary, you would also then see that influx of people coming in. So it was a bit of like, as you were getting your first tune ready, it would happen before you started the tune. But you'd see everyone go out these big doors at the back and you'd be like, oh my God, or to the side, depending where the stage was. And you had to sort of like just think, oh my God. So there was that. And you had, I'd say it became more purist. So not purist, not in a way, but there were people that were more, well, I like the drum and bass sound, I like the jungle sound, and then there were people that liked the more happy hardcore and the happier sound. But I think it did for a long time. There was definitely a bundle of ravers that liked a bit of all sorts and a bit of both, which was the best. You know, the first time I heard SMD, Matt play it, was Skegness. I'm not sure whether it was an actual Pleasure Dome event back then, but we was in Skegness. We was in the venue where Pleasure Dome was, and mate, he dropped it, and I was just like that. What's this? What's this? And he had it on dub tape, and luckily we had because we always used to meet in Music House and place like that. We had a bit of a session to cut each other's bits and bobs, and I got my fingers on it, and it was just like, this is ridiculous. It felt like a real big change. You know, it was definitely that sort of step that it was like, well, this is big. You know, this I want more like this. I need an hour of this record. I need it. And then things did. It felt like that's the beginnings. I know that again, there's been a big debate of where it started, and I completely agree. I think SMD 1 is a massive game changer, like huge, definitely.
Let's be honest, right? It's drug music, right? It's happy, euphoric, ecstasy music, right? We ask everybody, and you can say whatever you like to this question. How big an influence were drugs on the scene? And also on the creation of the music. Did you ever do drugs? Was it ever? Were you sort of, were you led by that sound? Or I'm just interested to know your sort of side of the story.
I think it's a massive part of culture, the scene, and all sorts of dance music. It's led by a heavy influence on drugs. I think people being drunk at a rave, even though it does happen, people definitely have drinks. It wouldn't have had the same impact that it had. I just think it's I don't know, I suppose it's that youth thing. You come through a bit rebellious and you want to try things. You want to try things that you come in front of you and you think, oh yeah, give that a go. And the two sort of go hand in hand, I suppose, with any type of rave, especially back then. The raves were the only things happening. Nowadays, you've got all sorts of festivals and events and club events. And I think, the drug culture still lends into that. When you hear, tragically, when things go wrong, sometimes it's in like really commercial clubs, or even in people's houses, and you just think, oh God, it is there, it is part of it. Music wise, yeah, I think it had an influence as me as a sort of producer, because you would sort of like think, right, what's really going to get people going? What's going to bring on them sort of vibes that makes people go, oh, well, back then everyone said it was the Rush. What would do it? And them big epic piano lines and strings and vocals, you would just sort of take yourself back to that sort of vibe of thinking, mate, me stood in a club with lights going and people around me, this is just going to work, this is going to sound great. So I suppose, yeah, I did sit there in a studio wanting it to sound a certain way, but it wasn't right, this is deliberate to do it. It was always clever to try and get drug references in music. I'd say I personally at my age wouldn't deliberately do it now as a way to, unless a sample came up or an idea came up that was really cool and, brilliant, I might do it. But the direct reference of, ecstasy or whatever, I suppose back then it was almost that naughty, like, oh, they're talking about, you can go back to Shaman, Ebenezer Good, sort of when they did that, not my cup of tea as a track, but what a genius bloody lyric to come up with. When they sat there in the studio, they must have just gone, this is just gold. This is just brilliant. We're just going to absolutely bamboozle Top of the Pops, Radio 1. They ain't going to have a clue how to deal with this, because you can't say, oh, it's referencing drugs, because it's not, but it is.
And those early, so those early tracks you were creating, thinking what's going to make people buzz, what's going to make people rush, and you created some of those early ones, Jack Attack, etc., etc. What was it like seeing ravers when you've created a tune like Jack Attack, for instance, one of your very early tunes, seeing the ravers getting that rush to that tune on the dance floor?
Oh, that's the drive. And it's still the drive today. When someone says a lyric back to you, or you can see them singing, or the best one is when they nudge whoever they're with. Yeah, that, to be honest, that is the drive. That's what pushes me as a producer forward, as a DJ. When you see someone recognise the tune, or even for the first time, see them again, they're either nudging their mate, it's a new tune, or listen, or they're nudging their mate because they know the tune, and there's that connection with them. That track means something to them. There's honestly nothing better. And places abroad tend to do this a little bit more. You get people that I'd say are big, not train spotters, that's rude, but they tend to stand and want to listen to what you're doing rather than being a raver dancing. So you watch them, you see them sort of stood there, and they're the ones that then when you come off, they sort of make a beeline for you, where they come over to talk to you, and then they've got so many questions of what was this remix, what was that track, what was this, that's a slightly different edit, and you're like, this is amazing, this is so cool that someone's took so much interest in what I've done, especially if it's something new, there is nothing better, because that's the worst thing for a DJ, or for me, I can't talk for other people, is when I've done a new tune, I've sometimes got that on now, my USB, I'll have it for show after show after show, but I just can't bring myself to sort of want to drop it sometimes, because you thrive off that instant reaction. And sometimes if it's especially if it's not a bootleg, it's completely original, new vocals, new everything, you sort of stand there and think, oh, I don't think they're ready for it. I don't, and so you come away sometimes, and it is getting that sort of step of the first time you play it track to then hoping, over time that it becomes that track again. But you've just got to, for me, I've got to get over that hurdle sometimes of bloody playing it, because I stand there and think, well, they're going off to this at the moment. If I do that, I don't want them to drop down. I don't want them to sort of be like, well, what is this? I was just singing to the last 5 songs I knew. So you sometimes it's a bit of a brick wall with me sometimes. But once I've started playing it, it's handy now because I get the radio station. So I do get to try things out there first, so it gives me a bit more confidence to think, yeah, I can drop that now.
Well, it's an interesting time because of coronavirus. A lot of the DJs that we speak to, or producers rather, are like, I'm creating tunes and I've got absolutely no idea whether it's going to be good or not. But I know that I can't make the same stuff that I was making prior to coronavirus because you just can't do that. It's not acceptable to be doing that. And the sound would have changed and the crowd would have changed, all that. So it's interesting, the idea of how important raves are for playing. In terms of, you launched, you did a couple of those, really great early tunes. And then we're there. You released the famous tune, and to say it's divided opinion is probably putting it mildly. It's Toy Town. Yeah. You made that in collaboration with your good pal Sharky. Loads of questions on it. Love it or hate it. It'd be an understatement to say that Toy Town is one of the single most recognisable happy hardcore track of all time, I think you could probably say. Interested to know about this. How did it come about? Why did it come about? Did you know that you had an absolute stormer on your hands? And did you have any idea that it would divide opinion so much?
I've fallen in and out of love with it myself over the years. I'm definitely back in love with it again now.
Oh, are you? Okay.
It's strange. Back when me and Sharky actually spoke about the sort of how we all sort of came about it a couple of weeks ago, and it was a bit of it was one of those chain of events that just seemed to sort of happen. I was working in a studio in Farnborough, and not Farnborough, Farnham, and I was sat there, and and this is how mad it was back then. Sharky turned up at the studios. He was in the area and he popped in to say hello. And I was working on a track. And I'd never been in a studio with him or been around John in a studio. I don't know whether he'd even made anything at that point. But he came on and there was a keyboard in front of me and he played like this. It was like a rock and roll riff. Well, I went and I was like, mate, what's that? I was like, mate, we've got to make a tune like that. That's brilliant. I really like it. So anyway, whatever happened, we sorted out going up to studios, and we put originally Toy Town was going to be called Bonkers because Bonkers again, sort of a bit intermingled. The Bonkers name came about from a pub in Butlins in Maidenhead, and I was there with Ramos, Nighty, Sunset Regime. And they all had Bonkers T-shirts on in this bar. And I was just like, Bonkers, what a bloody brilliant name for a track, a concept, a night. And I was just like, keeping that in my head. So anyway, the John Sharky thing had happened. And we were like, right, come on and get in the studio. So I was like, look, I've got this name, that rock and roll riff at the end of it. I want you to get on the mic and say, this is Bonkers. That can be the tag, this is Bonkers. So we did it. We laid it all out. And it was two similar-ish rock and roll style riffs. Nothing in the middle. It just broke down from that one to that one. So I was like, it just needs something. It needs something to break it out. Let's do like a middle section. So we laid out some chords and John, the noise, I'd wanted to use the choir noise I had on an old record, Outside World. So sampled up the noise. I was like, I want to do something like this. Let's make it, really sort of like German trance type buzz. So John started playing what became Toy Town, but it was like double speed. So it went ba 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 da ba da ba 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 da. So it was double speed. And I sort of sat there and I was like, I don't know. And it was just the first little section. So we sort of sat there and milled around. I was like, yeah, I like it, but I don't know. And we was all sort of scratching our heads a bit. And I sat there and I was like, right, on Cubase, you could open out the part and you could sort of then change as a grid. So you can then change where it goes. So I just started pulling it all across. We changed the timing of it to the speed of Toy Town. And it was like, there we go. That's something that works. It sounded at the time, it was something that I'd not sort of come across there. I was like, oh my God, that's sort of very similar to this. It sounded fresh. So we laid it all out and then did the second half of the Toy Town riff because the melody sort of goes over different. It's not a repetitive pattern. It's quite a long repetitive pattern. And we had that in the middle of this track with, again, as it kicked in, with a little sample of John saying this is bonkers. Went away. The first time we went away, came home, was listening to it, playing it to people. Everyone was like, yeah, this is a brilliant track. But everyone at the time was sort of saying that middle section's like brilliant. That's the bit. That is the bit. And it was like, yeah, the rock and roll copied pattern seemed a bit cheap and obvious, where we had this like magical middle bit that was original. So we went back up and we put the rock and roll bit in the middle, and we put the first Toy Town riff at the beginning, and came up with the second Toy Town melody for the end. Sort of sat there, and yeah, this is brilliant. And that night we booked 2 days in the studio, so we were staying at some of our friends who lived down the road, and you know, pretty much all night, because back then they were ravers as well. So we was just literally rewinding this tape, just listening to this tune all night. We were just sat there chatting, but in the background was this all night. And again, it sort of just came up that this rock and roll bit just sounded just like not right. It just didn't fit. So we went back up, and that's when the middle riff, the da 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 da, that got put in its place. And we just sort of said, right, should we just get rid of the bonkers thing now, because it doesn't make sense. It didn't fit the track. So we got rid of the bonkers thing. And the name Toy Town again came about. It is from Noddy and Big Ears, but it was actually an area in Chessington World of Adventures. And we had been there, again, I think it was Murray from Dreamscape, Dave Howard, Scouter, Dougal, you know, Slipmatt, a group of us had gone up there for whatever reason.
I love that.
And this area was called
all these hardcore DJs going to Chessington. Again,
yeah. And I just thought, God, yeah, that's a great name. You know, that is a good name. And yeah, whilst it was attached to Noddies and Big Ear, and we put the Noddies and Big Ear mix because John's ears, you know, stuck out, and we sort of said, oh, I'll be Noddy, you be Big Ears, you know, we'll just call it that, because it was, you know, again, it was a bit of tongue in cheek, it was a bit funny. And I can remember we did 2 mixes, and this was the point. It was we did one that was a little bit more breakbeaty, with the Eamon leading with a softer kick, and then we did one with this just outrageous distorted kick that was, again, we did it for more of a, right, that'd be more for up north, and this one would be for more down south. And out of the 2 now, I do prefer the breakbeaty one with the more subtle kick. But at the time, you know, for me, it was like, I'm playing, this is the one. And I can remember getting a call from Dougal. He played in Bagley's in London. And I think it was either for Labyrinth. It might have been for Labyrinth up there. It was for some, it was definitely at Bagley's. And he went, I played the kick drum one, the harder one in London. And I was just like, what? I said, what do you mean you played the kick drum one? Like the full on version? He was like, yeah. I was like, what happened? He went, yeah, it went off. It like really went off. And back then, you know, honestly, there was, I wouldn't say a north-south divide, but there was just an area divide that you knew if you went to like Liverpool, you'd be playing like more bouncy techno and the kick drummy sort of stuff, and the breakbeat stuff you'd sort of definitely leave alone. Same within Scotland, you know, the breakbeat stuff, some of it worked up there and people loved it, but they were definitely just like kicking snares and offs, and so you knew. And London was 100% one of them areas that, you know, you did stay away from the more kick drum led stuff because it just wasn't, it didn't ever seem as popular. But he did that, and then I suppose it just opened the floodgates for that time and that era where everyone was just like, right, okay, then let's just give this go. And then I suppose, again, the crowds evolved because it was that moment that some people left the scene, some people, you know, didn't like the evolution of it, you know, but I was at an age and a vibe that I loved the evolution, you know, as much as I loved what we were changing and had left behind, that new evolution, you know, the BPM was going up. Everything about it at the time was just like, oh my God, this is mad. This is brilliant. And, you know, I wouldn't say I look back at it with regret at all. But I do understand, again, even with the tune, I understand the Marmite-ness of it. I get it, you know, because it was a very defining. There were definitely more, what I'd say, happy hardcore tracks prior to Toy Town that were clearly happy hardcore. But Toy Town was that one that really blew up. You know, at the time, it was played by everyone.
We've had some questions on it, Ian. And Living Here on YouTube says, I don't believe that you can kill a scene with one tune. Because now, if you look at people discussing it, people are like, that for me was the death of happy hardcore. And I left and I never went back. Blah, blah, blah. So, but you've got other people going, you know what? It was fun and I liked it and it was a banger, right? So it does divide opinion. It is Marmite. But Living Here says, I don't believe you can kill a scene with one tune. If Cheese is to blame, there is worse out there than Hixie. I think Hixie becoming popular after the scene split made him the figurehead for the happy hardcore scene, and that made him a target for the old school who don't like happy hardcore. He therefore asks, do you think Toy Town is unfairly used as a scapegoat for the demise of hardcore?
Nah, it wasn't the demise of hardcore. It was the beginning of something
else.
It changed it for people, and that's the thing. Do you know what I mean? Some people, music's evolved. Through my journey in the scene, it's evolved so much for me. You know, I've gone from, whilst I still love the early breakbeat stuff at 128 BPM, 130 BPM, I still love stuff. Well, now, you know, there's this Frenchcore sort of blowing up, and some of that's at 200 BPM plus. If someone told me I'd like a 200 BPM plus tune, I'd have laughed at them because I've never quite liked it that fast. But some of it's brilliant. It's changed my thinking about it. So I think it didn't necessarily kill the scene, because the other people that were producing and making that music could have continued making it if they wanted. Some people did, you know, some people did continue making it. It was just that I was on a different path, and a lot of new people were coming into the scene around then as well. And, you know, for years, it was unbelievable. It was an unbelievable journey or era to be a part of. And yeah, for me, there was definitely some more what I would say were the beginnings of happy hardcore prior to Toy Town, but Toy Town just blew up. You know, it was one of those tracks that everyone seemed to play, so I can get it. If you're in the latter years of your raving as well, at that point, I could see why some people are like, this is so different to what I loved and what I got into. But for some people, that was almost the beginning of their journey. You know, that was the beginning of the start of us then leading on to Bonkers and things like that. So for some people, that was the beginning of their sort of journey into rave music.
Well, let's talk about Bonkers, because around about that time, you did finally get to use that name, and you used it to great success, as we've heard. Bonkers won £60, so you did something right there. But it was the biggest hardcore compilation. It was advertised on telly. You know, it was a real big seller. It did a huge amount for the scene. Tell us about how it came to pass. I mean, obviously, you know, we know the name now came from a T-shirt in a pub, but beyond that, the sort of, you were the brains behind it, and you set it up, and you created it, and you led it. So tell us all about how it all came to pass, and what your aim for it was, and your ambition at the time.
At the time, again, it was just a sort of thing in my head. I got a phone call from the distributor. Mo's Music Machine distributed our vinyl. And Lee, a fella up there, rung me and said, record label called React, trying to get hold of you. They, you know, they're all over Toy Town. They love it. They want to license it. At the time, they wanted to get Tony DeVee to do a remix of it. And they wanted to see where they could take it. So I was like, okay, this is good. So we sort of like got in contact. Along the way, I'd missed a few meetings, and John, in the end, I said, look, get up there and, you know, I'll let's start talking and let's see what's going to happen with it. So anyway, we had organised a meeting where it was both of us to finally go in, because we had discussed a few things on the phone. And I walked into the office. I was based up in Putney at the time. And in their office, there was a massive Carl Cox Fact album poster behind James Horrocks and Thomas Foley, who were the head honchos of React. And I sort of sat there, and like my head was gone, because I was just thinking, they do the Fact albums. This company do the Fact albums. They do the Carl Cox Fact albums. And we was talking about Toy Town. I was just going, yeah. I said, I'm up for anything. And I was trying to sort of just say, look, let's just get this sort of done. And at the time, we was talking about publishing and just crap like that they wanted to sort of take on some publishing and things. And I just sort of said, look, let's just forget Toy Town a minute. And I just said, did you do the Fact album? He said, is that post-writer? Because you've done this. And they were like, well, yeah. And I was like, right. I said, I've got an idea. I said, look, I've got loads of music. We've got loads of people around us. I said, why don't we do a concept where at the time, and John still, I was unaware, but John wanted to DJ, but at the time he was MC Sharky. So I was like, look, let's do this thing. I'll do a mix. Sharky can MC over it. We'll do it like a studio thing, but really high quality. I said, let's get this out there as an album, to which they bit onto straight away. And they're like, yeah, we looked at the sound of this. I said, I've got a few ideas for names and things like that. So we bounced backwards and forwards. And then over the course of time, then John, we started talking, and John was like, well, I'd like to do a CD too. And I was like, all day. I said, this is even better, because John was left of my field. I was one direction, he was another direction, but we were still within that music. The rave scene bubble was there. And it was like, well, you're going to completely complement what I leave out, and vice versa. So we sort of got the concept together. I said about the Bonkers name, I said, look, I'm more than happy for it to be used and abused, because it sat there. And I said, if anything, what a perfect branding for it. And that was it. It sort of bore out. And Bonkers 1, we did the mix, we did all the track listings, the albums came out, and I put a Bass D and King Matthew track on there called Like a Dream. It samples Madonna. Now, at the time, I got no clue that is so bad and can cause a nightmare. So we had done Bonkers 1, it had gone out, some had gone out. So I get a phone call from Thomas, and he was always the calm, but he wasn't at this point. And he was like, Hicksy, there's a fucking Madonna sample on your CD. And I was like, yeah? I was like, you've licensed it. And he was like, but it's on the CD's gone out. It's like in the shop. So I was like, right. So then they obviously talked to me about how bad it was, and the fact that it could be just pulled from and then not be taken back by Woolies at the time. Woolworths was the Dons. They were the main ones. So I was like, so there are some Bonkers 1 CDs out there with the sample in there. I don't even know whether people are aware of it, but that
might be more than 60 quid, that one.
Well, yeah. So there are some out there that have got the full Like a Dream Madonna sample in there. And then what we did was cut out the Madonna sample, and it got repressed and out there. But that was like the really early learnings of me, even though I'd got a record label and things like that, and we plodded along, that actually there's a big difference between a bootleg and the odd cheeky little thing that you're firing out, to putting something in an album and putting it into HMV, Price and Woolworths. So it was a
learning curve.
Yeah, it was, and it was, and I just could never forget, because James spoke to me afterwards as well. But Thomas, who's very calm and talks very correct, he wasn't. He wasn't at all.
So what do you think that the impact of Bonkers was on the popularity of the music and the music scene? And I wonder, like, when I listen to them now, I listen to Bonkers 1, and it's quite accessible. It's quite sort of, and I wonder if that's deliberate. So, there's a lot of scratching as well. You're really showcasing your skills, and then it becomes a little bit more obscure. I mean, every style is different, in fact, of Bonkers. I've listened to all of yours, but it becomes a little more obscure, in number 2. Was that deliberate, to sort of draw people in with your mixing and scratching skills with accessible music, that then they buy number 2 because they like number 1, and then it sort of educates them in hardcore music?
It wasn't, I wouldn't say deliberate, but Bonkers 1, it changed again for me with each Bonkers. Bonkers 2 was probably there was a couple. Bonkers 2, I wanted to put a little bit more of what I really loved on there, but I knew I was going to miss off some of them accessible tracks on there. And the reactions from our distributors through Woolies and at the R prices and that, it wasn't coming back as positive. So Bonkers 3, and then if people look at the time, it was why I remixed things like Entrance Set You Free, and I was always trying to get something, and because I had the clout of our album sales and the help of React, that we could approach some people to say, look, can we officially remix this for this project? So I did do it, and then there was a few albums along the way that we completely sort of went, again, left the field for me. Me and Jason UFO, we was going for a complete wanting to change. This was towards the real end of what people would say was happy hardcore, and just said, well, should we just do what we think, sort of thing. We were so influenced with Hard House and trance at the time. This was late 98, 99, maybe 98, 99. And again, we just went completely sort of in a different direction. Now that album, for some people, they love it. It's one of their favorite ones of the series. But again, from the feedback, where I hadn't picked off some of these tracks that would be the poster boy, so to speak, or the advert tag, they didn't have no commercialized music to pin on when they were trying to sort of advertise the album. So again, it was sort of led that, right, okay. And I wouldn't say I didn't enjoy remixing Entrance Set You Free. Guys, it's a no-brainer. I've remixed it a couple of times now. It's one of my favorite vocals ever. But sometimes my DJ sets, I love to throw in randomness. I love the fact if someone says, I wasn't expecting you to play that, but that was brilliant. That again is something I get off on a DJ. If someone says you played some stuff I wasn't expecting to hear tonight, but I loved it, and that's your goal, I suppose, sometimes. So with an album, that restriction is there. You can't always throw a real left field track for you or what you're known to play on an album, because sometimes it doesn't always work like that. Well, you've got a choice. You can either do an underground album and be happy with it and not maybe achieve the commercialized sort of success of it, or you sort of play the game a bit. And I wouldn't say I dislike the commercial tracks having remixes. I love it. It's great fun, but it does give you a slightly different audience or people that would pick up a physical copy of an album because they see on a tag or they hear on a tag that a certain artist is on there or a track's on there. It was this is what was the goal with the Clubland albums from the get-go. It was like this catalogue that you've got control of, because at the time all around the world were part of Universal. We just got to utilise this because this is going to be the selling point of these albums. And it was, whilst we had amazing original music in abundance at that point with it, some of these key commercial tracks were just mind-blowingly powerful on how it pulled people into buying them albums, because they might not be into hardcore rave music, but they were into the stuff that was in the charts, and all of a sudden there was a more extreme version of that music, and that's the thing. Everyone always likes something a little bit more harder or faster because they hear it on the radio or whatever, but everyone hears that on the radio. They want this version because it's like, whoa, this is different. I haven't heard this on the radio. This is great. So, yeah.
Bonkers was a huge commercial success, and it saw you start to headline, your Dreamscapes, Fusion, Hardcore Heaven, Helter Skelter, Resurrection, Slam of United, and all of them. In '96, you were really riding the crest of the wave. Is there any particular rave that stands out in that period for you that was like, this is the fucking shit?
There was loads, to be honest. And again, I think it might be just at the time you just had was just, you're so sort of involved in it, you don't realise it at the time. You stand up and, for me, it was always sort of following certain DJs, or again, if there was certain MCs on the stage, I'd be stood there thinking, oh my God, they're there.
Oh, really?
You know what I mean? So it was more that, and I got used quite early on to the sort of, where Sanctuary was such a massive part of our lives. I got a very quick instruction to playing to quite large crowds. So I wouldn't say I ever got used to it. I still got that nervous sort of feeling, but there were so many big mental raves that I suppose there was nothing that made me all of a sudden go, "Oh, we've done it." Because it was a
who in that case, slightly different question, I suppose. Who are your favourite promoters to work for, and why?
Murray Dreamscape was massively influential for me. He had some words of advice to me. I've recently put it on Facebook, actually. He had some words of advice to me on my first booking that scared the crap out of me of how I would move forward in my career, and realising that I was on first and I should be acting as a warm-up DJ and not basically fucking up the rest of his rave. And I just loved his attitude, because whilst I was a nipper on the scene, new face, he was always ready to have a good chat. He always asked me, because I'd started going to Scotland quite a lot, and he'd always ask about what was happening up there and what the people were like up there. And he just was genuine, he really was. And I got to have a few, like we did have the odd little mad day out here, there, Chessington and a couple of places like that. And he was just brilliant, just a lovely bloke. Dave and Penny, Powder Scouter, and another two. Dave was the front man, but you'd go into the office and see Penny, and just brilliant. But again, back then, I think the development of raves, you'd always walk into the Sanctuary, especially, and because the Sanctuary was used so much, promoters would move the stage, change the staging. We did one for, I'm going to say Dreamscape, and he put the stage in the middle, which was like mad. Do you know what I mean? We were just like, what? How mad's this? So it just gave always that different sort of perspective. And then when raves started venturing back outside as well, that was pretty cool. That was a pretty cool time to sort of see that, finally we're venturing to the outside again, because it just seemed for a long time that big raves had to be indoors. These festival type things would never come near rave music. But yeah, promoters, all of them at the time, all had a very similar sort of vision and idea. There were a few promoters very well known amongst DJs and MCs that were just a pain in the arse, I say is the nicest way, where they would just permanently be battling you about everything from set times to wages to how they can, promote things, and, just that they just had their own vision of how it should be. But, from the artist sort of sides, there were a few promoters that people, I wouldn't say didn't want to play for, but just used to think, oh, I've got to, go there. But they were very few. Most of them, some are still around now, some are still in contact with, and they're still the same. They're just very cool people to know and been around.
We really hope you're enjoying yet another one of Raw's in-depth interviews about the rave scene, which we are proud to say are now all curated into the British Library Sound Archive. All of us here at Raw HQ love how much you love what we do, and your generous one-off donations have been a huge help in covering our initial costs. But we're now a team of 5, putting in a combined 80 hours a week for no wages, with big plans to expand further, and so our costs are going up. As such, we could really use your help to keep Raw growing and developing, as you've seen us do since our launch in July 2020. First up, go and check out our brand new website. It's rawuk.com, where you can find loads of cool extra content, and you can grab Raw's first ever range of merchandise. That's rawuk.com for our new flashy website. We've also launched a new membership scheme where you can support us financially to create more content on an ongoing basis for less than the price of an oat milk cappuccino, plus you get great perks in return. Head to patreon.com/rawukpods. That's patreon.com/rawukpods to see exactly what's on offer. You can also join our YouTube membership, which is basically the same, or if you're not asked about a membership but you'd like to support us with a few quid as a one-off or a repeat donation, then head to our website and click the PayPal link. A reminder of that new website URL yet again, rawuk.com. Big love and respect to you all. Please keep supporting us. Hope you enjoy the rest of the act.
On Friday the 20th of August 2021, a new event, Return to Source, celebrating 90s rave, hardcore, jungle, happy hardcore, drum and bass and techno touches down at Suki 10C in Digbeth, Birmingham. We have Fusion South Coast legend DJ Druid, Quest and Fiber Optics DJ Fallout, the Uprising Northern legend that is DJ Paulo, and London Town's final trickster playing his first Happy Hardcore set in over 18 years. Tickets are priced at only £14. Just search Facebook and Eventbrite for Return to Source Rave.
Ian Hixie, we've talked about Bonkers. Now, this is Bonkers, actually. Just before the release of Bonkers 4, you were out walking your dog and you broke your neck. Is that correct?
No, well, yeah, but no. This is the mad thing with the rave scene. There's things always get screwed or turned or twisted. I did it on a motorbike, and I've done it twice, and I've done it on a jet ski. So yeah, it is obviously serious. But yeah, I wasn't walking my dog. I don't know where that's come from.
So the first time you did it, I mean, that's even more bonkers. You've done it twice. The first time was how? Sorry, not on a jet ski.
A motorbike. I went through a car.
Oh God, what was that like?
Window, out the other window, and I was hanging out the window the other side. They pulled out in front of me.
How terrifying!
Can't remember nothing. All I can remember was, again, my poor mum. She worked at the time at the hospital, so she overheard via work that I was being brought in. So she was at work and had heard my name because they had radio through to say this is happening. So yeah, that one brilliant. But all I can remember from that was at the time it was all about Ralph Lauren and your stupid bloody horse on your t-shirt. And the only thing I can remember was because they were sort of cutting my jeans and bits and bobs off me because they didn't know what had gone on. And I was like, don't cut my Ralph Lauren t-shirt. What? And he's mad because I can still remember my dad was like, you absolute dick. You're a fool. You know what I mean? Just sort it out. And I was just like, don't cut it. Don't cut it.
So what impact did it have upon you? Because if it was just before Bonkers 4, is that right? Have we got that bit right?
Yeah. Well, Bonkers, was it Bonkers 4? One of them I mixed in a block, doing it in the hospital. Parts of it in the hospital.
What?
Yeah.
How long were you in hospital for?
Oh, it was quite a while. It was a good sort of 3 weeks, 4 weeks.
Right. And how did you get a Dex into the hospital?
Well, no, what we did, this was the first time I started doing bits and bobs with a computer, which for me, it was like, this is not the sort of the same, but we'd sort of just got ideas and I was laying bits and bobs out, knowing that I had deadlines to get sorted. There was sort of no, I was all right. I was absolutely fine. And I sort of like, and I was in and out of hospital. I wasn't there sleeping every night because I had this like stupid bloody contraption thingy over my face and head. Well, not over my face, but sort of in my head. And I came home and I think it was Force and Styles had come down to sort of see me. And like they sort of walked in and I was there like this with this stupid thing on my head. And I was just like, what is that?
So you broke your neck before Bonkers 4 and you were having to, do some stuff in the hospital, and probably, I've got to say, I've never broken my neck, but I can't imagine it's all that pleasant and easy. And therefore, to be a self-employed record producer and DJ who requires to stand up and do things with his arms and must have been incredibly difficult. Was it? How did you manage it?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I was lucky. It wasn't, whilst it was serious. The only implication I've ever had since, and I still have, I have massive problems with my arm, like really bad pains, and it's took me out again from work on and off. I've, people tend to moan. There was a massive era where, or stages where I just wasn't making gigs, and people would always be like, "Oh, he ain't turned out again." Well, truth is, it wasn't intent. People think you can't be bothered. That's my job. You know what I mean? I love doing it. But at points, it took me out of the game. And, still now, mine is, I always sort of seasonal, I say, because as the weather changes, I seem to feel it a lot more. So as it gets warmer, I feel it, and then when the cold comes again, I start feeling it again. And yeah, on and off, it has affected me. At the time, I was probably a little bit more blasé about it than I should have been. I should have took it a bit more serious. But I think where I was young, I didn't actually have any pain from it. You know, the accident, I'd had a few bumps and some. My knees were quite badly bruised, but apart from that, I didn't have anything serious. So, and because I couldn't actually feel it, I think if I had a broken arm, you'd sort of be feeling things, but I couldn't. It was everything felt almost normal to me. So, I sort of almost plodded on straight away. I was like, right, let's just sort of get back to it.
So, and you've said that you didn't make it to gigs because of this, because of your condition at the time. So it obviously did have an impact upon you, and I wonder whether it had any impact upon your DJing, for instance. Because the reason I asked this, and I'm sorry to if it's rude, but I'm reflecting what it says on Amazon. There's an Amazon review of Bonkers 4 that it said that it impacted upon your mix and beyond. Now, given that you were sort of mixing it down in the hospital, that's not a huge surprise. But is that true? Is there anything in that, or is that unfair?
Yeah, I expect my head was sideways, to be honest. Whilst I thought I was in the game, I probably wasn't. Do you know what I mean? Along like even now, if the decks are at the wrong height, it really gives me jip. It's quite painful at points. Yeah, I can use that as an excuse why I've got a grumpy face on. But if
you do pots and pans.
Well, yeah, if the decks are at the wrong height, oh God, I stand there and I just think, get me off. Just it's quite uncomfortable sometimes. But yeah, it comes and goes. I cannot complain from the sort of break right through till now. You know, I know it could have been a lot more serious, and what I get as side effects, I sort of think, well, it could be a million times worse. It's crap sometimes. Like I said, I've missed gigs. I've missed a lot of gigs, and I've got a lot of shit online from it. But I don't feel I don't ever feel the urge to explain everything to everyone who demands an explanation. Sometimes it's like, well, you know, a lot of the gigs I missed, I then got back up there and sort of, you know, did it as soon as I sort of could. And yes, some that they never came back in and booked us again, but it can't be happening. That's the hard thing with the type of job I do, I suppose. You're booked so far in advance, you can't see what's going to be happening. You know, you don't know whether you're going to, you know, I know some of the boys that have had perforated eardrums and things like that, or been poorly and they miss gigs. And yeah, I get it. If someone's there to see them DJ and they don't turn up, they've paid their ticket price, they're like, fuck you, sort of thing. But I honestly don't know anyone that would say, nah, I'm not going to that tonight. Can't be bothered. No. Yeah, I can't. I generally can't. I do see it from the other side of the punter point of view, or the ravers, and the promoters. You know, they spent months getting this event together, and then all of a sudden, one of their artists can't turn up. It's shite. You know, it must do their brains in. But yeah, I've never intentionally gone, nah, not tonight.
I mean, the thing is, I think a lot of time people don't realise that there's a human at the other end, or you know, Hicksy is a person, and therefore he has all of the different things. You know, sometimes you're going to a rave, you've got a ticket, and you can't be asked because you're knackered. You're like, oh, I really can't bother, and so you don't go. But it doesn't matter because it's only your money. You know, you are merely human. You're just the same as the punter. Just you know, that's your job. Another thing is, around about that time, I mean, you were so busy. You were doing Kiss FM shows as well. Like you were also, I understand that around about that time, Slamming Vinyl got you to book the DJ lineups. And is that right? Is that correct?
No, never done a Slamming Vinyl lineup.
Is that right?
No, don't know where that's come from. That's not me.
Well, a few people have said that they understood that you did that. Like Gary Viberlite, for instance, mentioned it. No, it's absolutely not true.
No, not true. Definitely not. No, never.
Right. Okay. That's interesting. All right. Well, in that case, that's that question gone. In fact, well, there you go. And to move on then, in the latter stages of the 90s, you were playing several gigs every weekend, running a record label, producing prolifically, radio show. How did you manage to fit it all in?
Again, thinking now to back then, I didn't have kids, so
that'll do it.
That's probably the easiest answer. As manic as it is, back then, I've had this discussion with a few people that have done the same. Back then, honestly, some weekends you'd have sort of 3 and sometimes 4 gigs, but the 4 now of trying to fit that in one night. I don't know how actually we did do it. I generally don't. Again, back then, I think all the DJs got banned very, very regularly. It'd be like, yeah, I'm done. That's me sort of banned, and they'd start brocking up to get events for their drivers and things. But yeah, I suppose it was just it was just that part of that momentum that during the week you was in the studio going up to London, and that's the other thing. The thought of going up to London now drives me mad. It's a whole sort of like, I've got to go to London. Is there any way I can get out of this? Can I do it over the phone? It's horrible. But we'd just pop up to London. It'd be like, I'm going to pop up to London because, I don't know, Slipmatt's down doing dubs, or Dougal has got a slot at JTS, one of the other places, and you would literally pop to London for the day. That's like, I don't know. I suppose just
life gets in the way. Life gets in the way, doesn't it? The older you get,
I think so. We again, I've had this chat with a lot of the people I'm sort of friends with still. That some of them I don't speak to for months on end. Some like once a year. But you start talking to them again, and you're like, oh, it's like I was talking to you yesterday. And I suppose as you get older, you get used to it. It's sad in a way that you don't sort of talk to each other as a regular basis. But like you said, their lives go into a direction that they've got things going on, and same with me. But yeah, it is nice. There's friends out there from the rave scene that, like I said, I'll touch base with. Some of them regular still, some of them once in a blue moon. But you just sit on the phone for an hour, and then you put the phone down. It's like, it feels like I was talking to them on a weekly basis still.
Yeah. And sort of heading towards the end of 1999, hardcore was in a steep decline. Much of the production simply wasn't very good. Cheesy rip-offs of 80s ballads and everything sounding the same, etc. You yourself have admitted was the case in the past. What did you put that down to, and how did you feel about it?
My personal opinion, it's really weird. I just got this, I suppose, a line of, there's some things that I just detested. There was stuff that I liked. And I think it just evolved into more of a direction that I didn't like as much as it. Even my own productions, I was sort of sitting there thinking, no, this isn't what I'm liking at all. And it definitely started showing at the events. The numbers were declining. And then when you had some of the key promoters saying, well, I don't think we're going to book hardcore anymore, happy hardcore anymore, at everything or other venues they were going to, that made you suddenly sort of think, well, hang on, are we so sort of enclosed in it all that we've not realised that we've taken it into a direction, or I've took myself, I can't talk for others, but I took myself into a direction that wasn't as accessible or enjoyable on a dance floor. And had we lost that magic or whatever it was, that back in the day. So I think for me, again, we was forever, and even now we still talk about music and what direction we're making stuff and what noises we're using, what equipment we're using. It's an ongoing thing that producers, DJs, people who make music will still always be talking to each other about their sound. And even back then, we were. One of the things I wanted to say to you, because there was a meeting that we...
Well, you've just preempted my next question. Well done, Ian.
But this is the thing, that it's come across since your podcast that this was some sort of secretive...
You can tell I used to work for the News of the World, Ian, can't you?
Honestly, I never saw it as that. It was just literally.
Tell us about it, because it is fascinating. Because as far as we know it, for anybody that hasn't listened to some of the previous podcasts, just to let them know what we've said. Force and Styles told us about that meeting to save hardcore. That's the sort of way that it was seen at Slam and Vinyl HQ in Enfield. And I'm really interested to know about your memories of the day. Was there anyone in particular who was outspoken at that meeting, who said what, including you? All that sort of thing. We're just really interested to know and to get everyone's take who was there.
For me, it wasn't a secretive meeting as far as I know. Slam and Vinyl had just got together, predominantly the people they booked a lot, and there were some other people that was very influential in their music with labels and things like that. And the hard thing with any meeting like that, there's been calls for scene meetings since, and up until recently. But the hard thing is who do you invite? And it's not that you don't invite people, but if you invite everyone that's doing stuff towards the scene, you won't have a room big enough to get everyone in, and then no one's voices will be heard. So there has to be a sort of cut-off point, I suppose. And it wasn't a deliberate, as far as I know, there wasn't a deliberate cut-off point. It was no, don't invite that person, but invite that person. It was literally, we're thinking of not putting on as much hardcore at the moment, and the numbers are dropping. Our tape pack sales are dropping. Everything, the merchandise, all the interest in this music and this scene is dropping. So we went there, and again, as far as I can remember, I thought it was a great meeting. There were people very vocal about their ideas, and again, this is why I quite love any type of music, but the rave music was because there were so many sort of I always say yin and yang is perfect. It's just so important. And if you've got someone that wants to make music a certain way, then no one should really dictate how it should be. But at this meeting, it was a discussion to see if we'd missed something, if we'd, like I said, if it had evolved in such a way that it wasn't accessible or fun for people anymore. And there were some people, the main crux of it was it the BPM? Had it gone too fast? And I've always been open to variant speeds in sets. I think it's a great way to, push the crowd up, down, left, right, and all of that. So there was people talking about the speeds. Some of the artists wanted their labels to stay in a certain direction because they were doing well. Their sales were great. They were popular. And that was it. And I wouldn't say we came away from the meeting solving anything. It just, for me, it was great food for thought to hear such a cross-section, again, of artists all in one room, from the MCs to the record labels. I think some of the promoters were there. I'm not 100%. I can't remember all of it. But I can remember walking away and thinking, well, you've got your left and your right and middle, and this whole yin and yang concept for me is important. And I think
what was the conclusion of the meeting, if there was one, that something needed to happen to help the perilous situation in which Happy Hardcore scene found itself?
Well, at the time, I think I might be wrong on this. At the time, I think the name Happy Hardcore was there was a lot of people saying the name Happy Hardcore, it just feels outdated. It doesn't feel credible, and I've understood all along my career that we're not the butt of every joke. That's the wrong expression. But, you get some people that feel it necessary to say they don't like the music rather than just not mention it. Do you know what I mean? There's tons of music I don't like. There's tons of music I don't like within my own scene, but don't feel the need to earn a brownie point by saying, oh, I don't like that. You just, and that's always happened with hardcore. And the name Happy Hardcore definitely felt on, from my point of view. I know others seem to say the same thing, but it did feel at the time very dated. Again, the name Happy Hardcore now, I'm quite pleased of it. I suppose I like the fact because it's now in a department or an era back there. Do you know what I mean? And I enjoy diving into it. I'm so proud of what it done for me. And, now my family, everything around me is because of this rave scene, even to the point of where I met my wife. So that means my kids, everything, every moment of my life is because of music and the hardcore scene and the happy hardcore scene. So I'm never embarrassed by it. I just understand the fact that some people, have a very outspoken opinion of it within the scene or within the what would be the underground sort of market, I suppose. And I've come across it all along. And back then, especially, we on and off, we tried to sort of get more coverage on Radio 1, well, everywhere. And the doors seemed to just be shut on you. It would really be one of them moments you'd walk away, or put the phone down and you just think, this is just so soul destroying, because at points we were you know, at the peak of the height of rave music and happy hardcore, but we were still getting sort of turned down on things because, you know, of its imagery and maybe its age range, and the sort of looking at it. If you walked into a rave full pout, ready to go as an outsider, their heads must have just been like, because it was a spectacle, you know. But if you're in it, it's unreal. There is nothing like it, you know. Being in the midst of a rave, the BPM doesn't sound fast sometimes, you know. Once you're in there, you're like, this is mental. But walking in it or diving in on it, I get it, you know. I've always understood that. I found it hard at points, you know, when we've been shut down from getting it onto certain radio stations, or, you know, over the years I've had almost offers of bits and bobs going on certain TV programs, and then last minute it's like, oh no, it's not going to happen. You know, you just sort of think, so yeah, the meeting, I've gone off on one a bit. Yeah, the meeting, it was about the name Happy Hardcore a bit, I think. Okay. I'm sure that was that meeting. But I walked away.
Speed as well. It's a bit of speed, bit of the name. Did in your eyes, and we'll come on, and in the next part, we're going to go on to Millennium Jam and what happened with that. It was pretty bit of disaster, really. Did the meeting do anything?
Yeah, I think so. For me, I still, there were bits of it that I just took as that's great, you know, and hearing other people's sort of ideas of where they wanted to go and what they thought, I think I just picked out the bits that I thought were relevant to what I wanted to do. I still wanted to go in a slightly different direction with my music. Regardless of this meeting, I'd got to a stage where I didn't like what I was producing. You know, I'd got to that stage. I'd hit that point personally. But yeah, I walked away definitely. And then speaking to some of the boys afterwards, that there was definitely more focus on, right, well, this is what we should do, you know, and it almost, it sort of like reinvigorated everyone to be like, rather than being in this rut that we're sort of feels like we're in, well, let's crack on then, you know, let's buzz about it and let's see what's what. And it didn't take long after the meetings really for, you know, a few things happened, a few key events sort of then did come along, and it felt like there was a bit of change in the air.
Well, we're going to talk further about the death and rebirth of hardcore, which, of course, you played a major role in, next time here on Raw. Well, that's it for another episode of Raw, and if you like what you've heard, we'd love you to get involved. All of us here at Raw HQ buzz hard off how much you, the Raw crew, enjoy our work, and your generous cash donations have been a huge help since our launch. But we're now a team of 5, putting in combined 80 hours a week for no wages. We've got loads of plans to go further, expand our team and offer, but that does mean that our costs are also increasing. So we could really use your help to keep Raw growing and developing, as you've done since we started. So please do check out our website. Initially, it's rawuk.com for interesting extra content and to get your hands on our first ever range of Raw merchandise. That's rawuk.com. We've also launched a new membership scheme where you can donate to create more interesting and fun content on an ongoing basis, and you'll even get stuff in return. So head to patreon.com/rawukpods. That's patreon.com/rawukpods to see what's on offer. You can also join our YouTube membership, which is the same, or if you're not bothered about membership but you'd like to support us with a few quid as a one-off or repeat donation, head to our website and click the PayPal link. That website URL, one more time, rawuk.com. Respect to you for your support and for getting to the end of this episode. Please keep supporting us and help ensure there's more quality content coming your way on a regular basis. Oi, oi.
Hang on a minute. Babe. Naked wife.